The evening was quiet, almost eerily so. The kind of calm that made the occasional sound feel louder than it really was. Streetlights flickered as the rain had just stopped, leaving puddles that reflected the dim glow of the lamps. The FBI director was driving through this quiet suburban neighborhood, feeling the fatigue from a long day of meetings and briefings weigh heavily on him. His mind was occupied with thoughts about upcoming security updates, staffing concerns, and a meeting with the Attorney General scheduled for the next morning. The car hummed softly beneath him, a familiar sound that had comforted him on countless drives over the years. As he rounded a corner, headlights flashed in his rearview mirror. A police cruiser slowly approached, lights flickering in that unmistakable red and blue pattern. The director instinctively checked his speed and noted that he wasn't breaking any laws. He slowed slightly, pulling over to the side as the officer signaled. He had dealt with law enforcement countless times in his career, but there was something different about this situation. The officer seemed tense, rigid, and overly cautious. He stepped out of the car calmly, expecting a simple routine interaction. Instead, the officer's hand moved quickly to his holstered weapon. In the blink of an eye, the gun was drawn, pointed directly at him. The director froze, surprise and confusion mixing with a sudden, intense sense of danger. He raised his hand slowly, voice steady but urgent. "I'm the FBI director. I'm licensed and trained in law enforcement. Please lower your weapon." The officer's eyes widened, his stance unchanging. He repeated something about a suspicious vehicle, his voice shaky. The director, despite the adrenaline surging through his body, maintained composure. He knew the importance of not escalating the situation, of remaining calm, even when someone else's fear and poor judgment put him at risk. Onlookers began to appear. Neighbors peeked from windows and doorways, some stepping onto porches to get a better look. A few people started recording on their phones, capturing the tense standoff in real time. The director knew that any sudden movement could make the situation worse, so he moved deliberately, showing his badge clearly and keeping his hands visible. "Please check my credentials," he said, voice firm yet calm. "You'll see I'm who I say I am." The officer seemed hesitant but did not lower his weapon. Confusion mixed with fear clouded his judgment. He barked instructions, asking the director to keep moving toward the rear of the cruiser, clearly not sure what to do next. The director complied slowly, each step measured to show no threat. Despite the high tension, he couldn't help noticing the human side of the officer, the fear in his eyes, the nervous shaking of his hands, and the uncertainty that clearly came from inexperience. Minutes stretched painfully. The director could hear the crackling of the officer's radio as backup was called. The local dispatcher's voice was calm, but the situation escalated quickly on the street. Each passing second seemed to last an eternity. The director kept his composure, focusing on deep breaths, keeping his mind sharp and aware. He had dealt with dangerous situations before, but being held at gunpoint by a fellow officer was a surreal experience. He had to think carefully about every word and action. Around them, the small suburban street was coming alive with the presence of curious neighbors and a few late-night joggers who had paused to watch. One woman held her child close, whispering to stay back, while another man, phone in hand, filmed, silently unsure if he should intervene or just observe. The director's voice carried over the tension, calm but commanding. He explained again who he was, showed his badge from multiple angles, and even recited his name slowly, hoping the recognition might register. The officer flinched at each movement, each flicker of light reflecting off the director's badge. His mind raced with possible scenarios, each one seeming more dangerous than the last. Despite the clear evidence in front of him, the officer's fear clouded his judgment. The director noticed every detail. The officer's hesitation, the way his boots shifted slightly, the tightening grip on the firearm. It was a human moment of error, one that could have ended tragically if the director had lost his composure for even a second. While all this was happening, the director's phone remained in the car. He had considered reaching for it, but he knew any sudden movement could be misinterpreted. So he relied entirely on his training in de-escalation, speaking slowly, deliberately, and with authority tempered by patience. He told the officer that he understood caution, that he appreciated the officer's responsibility, but that the situation needed verification to avoid catastrophe. Gradually, more neighbors gathered, whispering among themselves. Their murmurs created a low hum of anxiety, adding to the pressure of the moment. Some were visibly scared, realizing the seriousness of a gun pointed at a man, yet they couldn't help feeling sympathy for the young officer, trapped between fear and duty. The director caught glimpses of their faces, noting the mixture of concern and fascination. He realized that this small street had become an unintentional stage for a moment of intense human drama. The officer finally radioed for verification, repeating the director's name and credentials. The tension eased slightly as the dispatcher confirmed the identity and instructed the officer to lower the weapon. Slowly, cautiously, the firearm was drawn back. Relief washed over the director, but he remained composed, aware that any sudden celebration or movement could still be risky. He thanked the officer, maintaining a calm tone that spoke of professionalism rather than triumph. The neighbors' whispers turned to quiet exclamations. Phones captured the lowering of the gun and the recognition of the man who had just been held at gunpoint. A few people murmured about the irony, about how the person responsible for national security had just experienced a terrifying moment of vulnerability in his own car. The director, despite the adrenaline, felt a strange sense of clarity. He had survived an intense human error, one that highlighted both the fragility and resilience of people. As the officer finally backed away, other officers arrived on the scene to ensure everything was under control. The director remained calm, explaining his experience clearly and politely to the arriving officers. There was no anger, only a firm recounting of the events, emphasizing the importance of verification and communication. He knew that this incident, while frightening, was an opportunity for learning, both for the young officer and for the wider law enforcement community. The situation was finally resolved without physical harm, but the director's heart still raced. He reflected on how quickly fear and misunderstanding could escalate, even among those trained to protect. The experience was a sobering reminder of the human element in every profession, particularly in law enforcement. One moment of panic, one misjudged action, and the consequences could be severe. Neighbors began to disperse, some shaking their heads in disbelief, others still filming for social media. The director got back into his car, taking a moment to collect his thoughts. The familiar hum of the engine felt comforting again, grounding him after the surreal events. He drove slowly, reflecting on the experience, the young officer's fear, and the importance of calm judgment under pressure. By the time he reached the edge of town, he was already thinking ahead. This story, he realized, would be shared as an example of human error, of vulnerability, and of the need for constant vigilance and patience. He understood that even those in positions of great authority were not immune to mistakes or misunderstandings. It was a lesson in humility, one he would carry forward into his work, meetings, and future briefings. As he finally approached his home, the evening had fully settled in. The rain had left the streets glistening, and the quiet returned, almost as if nothing had happened. But he knew that the memory of that tense, surreal encounter would linger, a reminder of how fragile trust and safety could be when fear overtakes reason. He stepped out of the car, taking a deep breath, feeling grateful for the calm resolution and aware that the real work of learning from the incident had just begun. The night had taken on a strange, tense feeling that lingered even after the initial shock of the encounter. The FBI director remained on the side of the road, still calm but alert, carefully observing the officer's every move. The young officer, hands still trembling slightly from the adrenaline, kept the gun ready, unsure what would happen next. The director knew he had to maintain composure. One wrong word, one sudden gesture, and the situation could spiral again. He took a slow breath, letting the tension settle slightly, and spoke in a calm, measured voice. He explained his position, again repeating his name, his title, and the fact that he carried identification verifying who he was. He showed his badge from multiple angles, making sure the officer could see it clearly. The officer hesitated. His training told him to be cautious, but his fear clouded his judgment. Every movement the director made seemed suspicious, even though he was only trying to cooperate. The director noticed that the officer's eyes darted nervously from him to the radio, clearly seeking confirmation from dispatch. He understood the human side of fear, the way it could override logic, and he remained patient, speaking slowly, reassuringly. Minutes passed with a heavy silence broken only by the occasional crackle of the radio. The dispatcher's calm voice came over. The officer's radio, instructing him to verify the man's identity. The officer repeated the information hesitantly, as if unsure he had heard correctly. Meanwhile, the director kept his hands raised, showing no sign of aggression. His calmness, his careful explanations, and his unwavering composure began to have an effect. The officer's body language slowly changed from rigid tension to cautious observation. It was a delicate balance. The director knew he had to continue speaking calmly without challenging the officer's authority. As the officer attempted to confirm his identity, the tension on the street grew. Neighbors had begun to gather, drawn by the flashing lights and the intensity of the situation. Some whispered among themselves, speculating about what was happening. A few were clearly worried, holding their children close. Others recorded the scene on their phones, sharing the footage live with friends or posting it online. The director noticed the mix of curiosity and fear, realizing that his calm behavior might also be influencing the bystanders. They were watching a dangerous situation unfold and seeing that even someone in a high position of authority could be vulnerable. The officer's hand shook slightly as he spoke into the radio again. The director kept his tone steady, calmly offering additional details and repeating his identification. He explained his purpose, emphasizing that he had no intent to cause trouble and that cooperation was the only goal. Each word, each movement was designed to reduce the officer's fear while ensuring his own safety. It was a test of patience and understanding, requiring every bit of the director's experience in high-pressure situations. Backup officers arrived on the scene, their presence initially adding to the confusion. They approached cautiously, weapons drawn, and asked for identification and clarification. The director complied fully, showing his badge again and answering their questions with the same calm, steady tone. The new officers, more experienced than the first, immediately began to take control of the situation, recognizing the potential for disaster. They spoke to the young officer, helping him understand that the man he had been holding at gunpoint was not a threat. Gradually, the officer's grip on the weapon loosened and the tension began to ease. Despite the relief that began to settle in, the director remained vigilant. He knew that situations like this could turn in an instant. He continued to speak gently, making sure that the young officer felt supported, not shamed. His words were a mix of instruction and reassurance, helping the officer regain his composure. The director's patience was remarkable, reflecting years of experience in managing tense confrontations. He knew that de-escalation was key, that showing empathy could prevent tragedy, and that remaining calm could influence everyone around him. Neighbors continued to watch, some whispering to one another, some clearly shocked at what they had just witnessed. They saw a man, someone who normally commanded respect and authority, held at gunpoint by another person, and handled the situation with remarkable composure. It was a lesson in human behavior, in how fear could dominate reason, and how calm leadership could restore order even in the most dangerous situations. Some bystanders commented quietly on the officer's inexperience, while others sympathized with his fear. The director understood both perspectives and used the opportunity to encourage the young officer's growth. Even in this highly stressful moment, eventually, the first officer lowered his gun completely, visibly relieved but still shaken. The backup officers continued to provide support, guiding him through the process of verifying the director's credentials and documenting the incident. The director thanked the officers, acknowledging the complexity of their roles and the difficulty of making split-second decisions under stress. His voice was firm but understanding, reinforcing the importance of careful judgment without condemnation. He knew that mistakes happened, and that the way people responded afterward could define them just as much as the error itself. The night air remained tense, but gradually began to lose its edge. The director's calm demeanor had a ripple effect, helping to calm both the officers and the onlookers. The young officer, now realizing the seriousness of what had occurred, took deep breaths and tried to steady his nerves. He had experienced fear and confusion in a way he had never imagined, and the realization of how close he had come to a potentially tragic mistake began to sink in. The director's patience and understanding helped him process the event without panic or shame. Meanwhile, the director reflected internally on the human side of law enforcement. Even those trained to protect and serve were susceptible to fear and misjudgment. The incident highlighted the importance of clear communication, verification, and empathy in handling high-pressure situations. It also reminded him that leadership wasn't just about giving orders or making decisions from a position of authority. Sometimes it was about guiding others through moments of fear, helping them regain control, and turning a potentially dangerous situation into a learning experience. The bystanders, too, began to leave gradually, some still talking quietly about what had happened. The street, once filled with flashing lights and tension, returned to its quiet suburban calm. The director remained for a moment longer, ensuring that all officers involved were clear about the next steps and that the situation was fully documented. He made sure the young officer understood the importance of reflection and learning from this experience, emphasizing that mistakes could be valuable lessons if handled correctly. As the director finally got back into his car, the adrenaline began to fade, replaced by a mix of relief and contemplation. He thought about the officer's fear, the potential danger, and the importance of remaining calm under pressure. He considered how easily a misunderstanding could escalate into tragedy, and how human judgment, for better or worse, played a central role in every situation. The drive home was quieter now, the hum of the engine soothing, but his mind remained sharp, replaying each moment and evaluating the lessons learned. He realized that the night had taught him more than he initially expected. It wasn't just about being held at gunpoint. It was about patience, understanding, and the human capacity for error. He knew that the incident would be analyzed, discussed, and learned from, not just by the officers involved, but by law enforcement as a whole. It was a reminder that even in positions of great authority, one must remain humble, vigilant, and compassionate. By the time he reached the outskirts of town, the streetlights reflected off the wet pavement, creating a quiet, almost peaceful scene. The director took a deep breath, letting the tension drain from his body, feeling grateful that the situation had ended without harm. Yet he knew the lessons would stay with him, guiding him in future decisions, briefings, and interactions with both law enforcement colleagues and the public. It was an unforgettable night, one that demonstrated both the fragility and resilience of human behavior, and the importance of calm leadership in the face of fear and uncertainty. The events of the previous night had barely settled when the story began to spread. By morning, neighbors had shared videos online, and social media was buzzing with footage of the tense encounter. People were shocked, intrigued, and confused all at once. The idea that an FBI director had been held at gunpoint by a local officer seemed almost surreal. News outlets picked up the story quickly, turning a quiet suburban street into a place of national attention. The director, while still reflecting on the night's events, knew that the real challenges were just beginning. Inside the local police department, the atmosphere was heavy. Officers whispered in corners, replaying the incident and questioning the decisions made. The young officer who had pulled the gun was being questioned repeatedly, his face pale and hands still trembling. Supervisors demanded explanations, not just about the actions taken, but about why the officer had not verified the director's identity sooner. There was tension, confusion, and a growing sense of urgency. The situation had escalated from a single misunderstanding to a full-blown administrative crisis. Meanwhile, the FBI director had returned to his office. The calm and professionalism he had displayed on the street was now replaced with the focus and determination of someone who understood the broader consequences. He was aware that this incident would be dissected in every direction, both legally and publicly. He met with his team, detailing the sequence of events and emphasizing the importance of accurate communication and verification. The conversation was calm and deliberate, but there was an undercurrent of seriousness. Mistakes like this could never be repeated. Back in the suburban street, the local community was buzzing with curiosity. People who had watched the live footage were sharing theories, some commenting on the irony of a high-ranking official being held at gunpoint by a local officer. Others expressed concern for the young officer, noting that fear and stress could lead to such mistakes. It became a topic of discussion at schools, workplaces, and online forums. The director's reputation remained intact, but the event itself had become a symbol of human error and the unpredictable nature of authority and fear. The local police department launched an internal review immediately. They examined body camera footage, radio transmissions, and witness statements. The young officer's inexperience and fear were clear, but so were the failures in protocol and supervision. Every step of the incident was analyzed, scrutinized, and debated. The department faced pressure from the public, the media, and federal authorities. The director himself was called upon to provide a formal account, which he did with clarity and professionalism, highlighting both the human error involved and the importance of accountability. The media attention grew rapidly. National news stations aired clips of the incident, and social media posts went viral. People were fascinated by the situation, some expressing outrage on behalf of the director, others questioning the training and readiness of local officers. Discussions about law enforcement procedures, fear, and human judgment filled online platforms. The director remained composed throughout, understanding that public perception and media scrutiny could be as powerful as the actual events themselves. He used this as an opportunity to educate, highlighting the need for careful verification, clear communication, and calm decision-making in tense moments. Meanwhile, the officer who had drawn his weapon faced growing anxiety. He was aware that his actions had become public and that consequences were imminent. Internal affairs investigators spoke with him at length, carefully documenting his account and evaluating his state of mind during the incident. The young officer admitted his fear and inexperience, acknowledging that he had overreacted. The investigators considered not just the immediate action, but also the context, including stress levels, training, and decision-making under pressure. This was not simply a case of defiance or malice, but one of human error amplified by fear. The director, in parallel, reflected on the nature of authority and vulnerability. He understood that even highly trained professionals could be exposed to danger when fear clouded judgment. The night's events became a case study in human psychology, law enforcement training, and the importance of calm leadership. He documented his thoughts, preparing for meetings and briefings that would follow, ensuring that the lessons learned could benefit others in similar roles. As the day progressed, discussions about the incident reached city officials and federal authorities. There were calls for accountability, better training, and improvements in communication protocols. Experts in law enforcement and public safety analyzed the situation, providing input on how such misunderstandings could be prevented. The director's calm and methodical handling of the event became a point of reference, illustrating that patience and clear communication could prevent unnecessary escalation. The young officer faced a difficult internal and emotional journey. He struggled with guilt and embarrassment, knowing that a single decision had put himself and a high-ranking official in danger. Counseling and support were offered, emphasizing that mistakes could be opportunities for growth if acknowledged and addressed responsibly. His colleagues, while disappointed, also recognized the pressures of the moment and the human tendency to fear the unknown. This dual perspective of accountability and empathy became central to the department's review process. The community continued to react. Conversations in neighborhoods, online forums, and workplaces reflected both fascination and concern. People debated the actions of the officer, the response of the director, and the broader implications for law enforcement. Schools and workplaces discussed the importance of decision-making under pressure, empathy, and understanding. The incident became a story of caution and learning, highlighting that even the most routine situations could become high-stakes moments when fear and authority intersected. By evening, the initial shock had passed, but the effects were still evident. News outlets followed up with interviews, community meetings were held, and law enforcement agencies reviewed protocols. The director had returned to his work, focusing on broader responsibilities while ensuring that the incident was addressed thoroughly. He knew that his calm response had prevented a tragedy, and that his professionalism could serve as a model for others in law enforcement. The night's events were now being analyzed, not just as a dangerous encounter, but as an opportunity for reflection. The incident highlighted how fear, inexperience, and miscommunication could combine to create dangerous situations. It also demonstrated the importance of patience, empathy, and clear communication in resolving conflicts. Both the director and the officer would carry the lessons forward, shaping future decisions, policies, and training practices. As the sun set and the community settled back into routine, the director reflected on the human element in every situation. Even the most prepared individuals could face vulnerability, and even the most well-intentioned actions could have unintended consequences. The incident became a reminder that law enforcement was as much about human judgment, empathy, and communication as it was about rules, authority, and training. Neighbors continued to discuss the events, some amazed at the calm demeanor of the director, others sympathetic to the officer's fear. The story became a narrative about human nature, vulnerability, and learning from mistakes. The director's careful handling of the encounter reinforced the message that calm, measured responses could prevent escalation and save lives. In a world where fear often drives action, patience, understanding, and communication proved to be the most effective tools. By nightfall, the media coverage had shifted to analysis, interviews, and expert opinions. The director's story was cited as an example of professionalism under pressure. The young officer faced formal review and counseling, learning valuable lessons about responsibility, awareness, and composure. The community, still buzzing with interest, reflected on the events as a lesson in both human behavior and public safety. The night had left a mark on everyone involved, creating a narrative that would be remembered and discussed for months to come. The following morning, the atmosphere in the local police department was tense and heavy. The internal affairs team had arrived to begin a formal investigation, and every officer in the building seemed to feel the weight of the previous night's events. The young officer who had drawn his weapon sat quietly, a mix of fear, shame, and anxiety on his face. He knew the incident would have consequences, but the full extent of those consequences was still unknown. Supervisors were reviewing the body camera footage, comparing radio communications with witness statements, and examining the protocols that had been overlooked. Every detail mattered. The department wanted to understand exactly how such a serious mistake had occurred and to prevent it from happening again. Inside his office, the FBI director received a call from the head of internal affairs, requesting a detailed statement. He answered calmly, recounting every moment of the encounter, emphasizing both the danger he had faced and the human errors that contributed to the situation. He spoke carefully, highlighting the young officer's fear and inexperience without diminishing the seriousness of the action. The director wanted the investigation to be thorough and fair, and he knew that clear communication would be critical. He provided his account, detailing the events in a way that would be useful for both training and accountability purposes. Meanwhile, the officer struggled with the realization that his actions had been broadcast across the nation. He had become a symbol of human error, and he felt the heavy eyes of public scrutiny on him. Internal Affairs spoke to him at length, not just questioning his actions, but also providing guidance and support. They discussed how fear had influenced his judgment, how protocols should have been followed, and what lessons could be learned from the incident. The officer began to understand the magnitude of his mistake, but he also recognized that this was an opportunity to improve, to grow, and to ensure it never happened again. The community continued to respond as well. Online discussions, news articles, and social media posts reflected a wide range of opinions. Some people expressed outrage on behalf of the director, criticizing the officer and questioning the department's training and supervision. Others sympathized with the young officer, noting that fear and inexperience could overwhelm even those with good intentions. The conversation became a broader discussion about law enforcement, public safety, and human behavior under stress. The director's calm handling of the situation became a central point of focus, a reminder of the importance of composure, patience, and clear communication. By mid-morning, the department held a meeting with all officers, emphasizing the lessons learned and reviewing proper procedures. They discussed how quickly fear could escalate, how important it was to verify identification, and how communication could prevent unnecessary confrontations. The young officer listened intently, absorbing every word. His embarrassment was still present, but it was accompanied by a growing understanding of responsibility and professionalism. The meeting also served as a reminder that law enforcement required both skill and humanity, and that mistakes could become opportunities for learning if handled correctly. In parallel, the director returned to his routine, balancing his responsibilities while remaining engaged with the situation. He met with his team to review the incident from a broader perspective, identifying lessons that could improve training and coordination between local and federal authorities. He emphasized the human element, explaining that fear and error were natural, but accountability, learning, and composure were equally essential. His leadership in this moment was subtle yet powerful, influencing not only his team but also the wider law enforcement community. The investigation progressed, with interviews conducted with every officer involved, including those who had arrived as backup. Witnesses from the neighborhood provided statements, and body camera footage was reviewed frame by frame. The young officer's actions were evaluated against department protocols and national standards. It became clear that while fear had played a significant role, there had also been lapses in training and supervision. The department faced the dual challenge of addressing the officer's error while also improving systems to prevent similar situations in the future. At the same time, the director took a personal interest in ensuring that the young officer received guidance and support. He recognized that shaming or punishing without education would do little to prevent future mistakes. Through careful communication and mentorship, he aimed to turn a dangerous situation into a learning experience. He shared his perspective, explaining how calm decision-making and clear communication could save lives and prevent misunderstandings. The officer listened, gaining insight into both the responsibilities of law enforcement and the human side of mistakes. The public continued to follow the story closely. News coverage emphasized the unusual nature of the incident, and experts weighed in on the implications for law enforcement training and protocol. The director's actions were praised widely, and discussions emerged about how similar situations could be prevented in the future. The young officer faced criticism, but also guidance and support from colleagues who understood the pressures he had faced. This dual focus on accountability and growth became central to the narrative, reinforcing the importance of learning from mistakes. As the day wore on, the officer began to reflect deeply. He considered the chain of events, the split-second decisions, and the human errors that had contributed to the situation. He understood that fear could cloud judgment, but he also recognized the value of guidance, training, and mentorship. The conversations with internal affairs and the director had provided clarity, helping him see both the consequences of his actions and the path forward. He resolved to take the lessons seriously, knowing that his career and the safety of others depended on his growth and professionalism. By evening, the department completed the initial stages of its investigation. The young officer was informed of temporary disciplinary measures, which included mandatory retraining, counseling, and supervision. The director, having provided his statement and guidance, continued his work, but remained mindful of the lessons learned. He reflected on how quickly human error could turn routine situations into dangerous ones, and how leadership and composure could make all the difference. The investigation also prompted broader discussions within the department and community about training, communication, and human behavior under stress. The young officer, though still shaken, began to regain confidence. He understood the importance of preparation, verification, and calm decision-making. The director's example had left a lasting impression, demonstrating that even in moments of fear and vulnerability, patience, professionalism, and empathy could resolve conflict and prevent tragedy. The community, too, continued to engage with the story, seeing it as both a cautionary tale and a lesson in human behavior and responsibility. As the night fell, the events of the past 2 days settled into reflection and learning. The incident had left marks on everyone involved: the director, the young officer, the department, and the community. It had highlighted the fragility of trust, the impact of fear, and the importance of calm leadership. At the same time, it provided an opportunity for growth, accountability, and understanding. The director returned home, contemplating the events, grateful for the resolution and mindful of the ongoing lessons. The officer, facing the consequences and guidance, resolved to improve, understanding that mistakes, when addressed properly, could lead to growth and a stronger, safer future for everyone involved. The weeks that followed the incident were filled with careful reflection, procedural review, and personal growth for everyone involved. The young officer had been formally charged with misconduct, and while the consequences were serious, the process was designed to be fair and educational. He faced a period of jail time, which served as a stark reminder of the responsibility that came with holding authority. But he also received guidance and counseling to help him understand the depth of his mistake and how to prevent such errors in the future. It was a time of reckoning, but also of learning. The FBI director continued with his responsibilities, but the experience remained vivid in his mind. The incident had been frightening, yet it reinforced his belief in the importance of calm, deliberate action under pressure. He used the event as a teaching moment for his team, sharing insights into de-escalation, patience, and empathy. He emphasized that mistakes, when addressed responsibly, could become powerful lessons for the future. The director's approach remained composed and thoughtful, setting an example of leadership that combined professionalism with humanity. The local community, too, continued to engage with the story. Discussions at town meetings, social media conversations, and news analysis emphasized the broader lessons learned. People reflected on human error, fear, and the challenges of law enforcement. While some criticized the officer's actions, others focused on the need for improved training, communication, and empathy. The incident became a catalyst for meaningful dialogue about public safety, human behavior, and accountability, highlighting that mistakes could be addressed constructively to strengthen the community and its institutions. In the police department, reforms were implemented. Training protocols were revised to include scenarios involving high-ranking officials, identification verification, and de-escalation techniques. Officers were encouraged to reflect on how fear and uncertainty could influence their actions, and were provided with additional support and guidance. The department sought to create an environment where mistakes could be addressed openly, lessons could be learned, and professionalism could be reinforced without creating fear or resentment. The director's experience served as a benchmark, illustrating both the consequences of error and the importance of calm leadership. The young officer spent his days reflecting deeply on the decisions he had made, the fear that had driven him, and the potential consequences of his actions. He understood that while fear was a natural human response, training, preparation, and composure were critical to making safe and responsible choices. Counseling sessions helped him process guilt, learn self-control, and rebuild confidence in his abilities. Mentorship from more experienced officers guided him through the complexities of decision-making under pressure. The director's calm, composed approach became a model for the officer to emulate, teaching him that patience, empathy, and careful thought could prevent unnecessary danger. As the incident moved further into public discussion, experts in law enforcement and public safety highlighted the lessons learned. Articles and news segments emphasized the importance of verification, training, and human judgment. The director's calm response became a key example in discussions about crisis management and de-escalation techniques. The young officer's experience was also noted, emphasizing that mistakes, while serious, could provide opportunities for growth and improvement when addressed constructively. The director reflected on the human element in law enforcement. He understood that even highly trained professionals could face vulnerability, and that fear could quickly override reason. The incident had provided him with insight into how ordinary officers might respond under stress, and he shared these lessons widely within his team and with colleagues across the country. He emphasized empathy, communication, and careful judgment, reinforcing that leadership was not just about authority but also about guiding and supporting others in moments of uncertainty. Meanwhile, the officer's colleagues in the department began to support his recovery and learning. They recognized the pressures he had faced and the human errors that could occur in high-stress situations. Peer mentoring and guidance became a cornerstone of his rehabilitation, reinforcing the importance of teamwork, accountability, and personal growth. The officer's experience, though challenging, became an example of how mistakes could lead to meaningful reflection and improvement when addressed with honesty, support, and structure. The community slowly returned to its normal routine, but the memory of the incident remained a point of reflection. Neighbors discussed the importance of patience, empathy, and clear communication. The story of the FBI director being held at gunpoint became a reminder of the fragility of trust, the consequences of fear, and the importance of accountability. It was a cautionary tale, but also one that highlighted growth, learning, and resilience. People recognized that fear could influence behavior, but education, mentorship, and reflection could transform mistakes into positive lessons. Over time, the young officer emerged from his period of consequences with a deeper understanding of his responsibilities. He applied the lessons learned to his work, approaching situations with greater awareness, patience, and composure. The guidance he received, both from internal affairs and indirectly from the director's example, helped him rebuild confidence and professionalism. He understood that accountability was not just about punishment, but also about growth, learning, and improvement. His journey became a model for how law enforcement could handle mistakes constructively. For the FBI director, the incident remained a powerful reminder of the unpredictability of human behavior. He continued his work with renewed awareness of the challenges officers face on the ground, understanding that fear, stress, and uncertainty could influence actions. He shared his experience with colleagues, emphasizing that leadership required empathy, patience, and a steady hand. The story became part of broader discussions about law enforcement training, public safety, and human behavior under stress, illustrating both the dangers of error and the potential for learning. The night of the incident, the tense encounter, and the subsequent investigation became a lasting lesson for all involved. The director had shown calm leadership, turning a dangerous situation into an opportunity for guidance and education. The young officer, though initially overwhelmed, had grown through reflection, counseling, and mentorship. The police department improved its training, the community engaged in meaningful dialogue, and public awareness of the importance of patience, verification, and human judgment increased. The event had left its mark but also provided valuable lessons for the future. As months passed, the young officer fully embraced the lessons of the incident. He approached his work with renewed caution, awareness, and understanding. Mistakes were no longer seen simply as failures, but as opportunities for reflection and improvement. The FBI director continued his role with vigilance and empathy, guiding his team and influencing broader law enforcement practices. The story of that night remained a symbol of the delicate balance between authority, fear, and responsibility. It showed that even in moments of tension and vulnerability, calm, human-centered leadership could turn potential tragedy into a powerful lesson. Both the officer and the director emerged stronger, wiser, and more aware of the profound responsibility inherent in every decision made in the line of duty. The incident ultimately left a legacy of growth, accountability, and human understanding. It demonstrated that mistakes could lead to meaningful lessons, that fear could be managed with patience and communication, and that leadership was as much about guiding others through moments of uncertainty as it was about authority. The young officer's journey, the director's calm leadership, and the department's reforms combined to create a narrative that emphasized resilience, learning, and the power of human empathy in even the most challenging situations. The story ended not with fear or anger, but with understanding, growth, and a renewed commitment to doing better in the future.